Chala in Peru on my way to Lima to get out of here.
She survived roads that kill people, crossed borders no one warned her about, rode alone where help never comes. But the one thing that finally stopped Noraly Schoenmaker wasn't the road. At 38, Noraly Schoenmaker did something she had never done before. She slowed down, not because she wanted to, because something forced her to. For years, Noraly moved like nothing could touch her. Collapsed bridges, hostile checkpoints, endless miles of danger. She rode through all of it as if fear simply didn't exist. Then the pattern changed. Trips started ending early. Her motorcycle disappeared. Bones were broken. Plans were canceled quietly. No big announcements. No clear explanations. And the questions began to grow. Was this just bad luck? Or was the life she built on constant motion finally catching up with her? Because when someone lives on the edge for too long, the most dangerous moment isn't the crash. It's the moment the road says, no more. But here's what fans don't know. The last journey didn't just end early. It ended badly. A decision was made off camera. A warning was ignored. And something happened that was never fully addressed. In the days that followed, communication changed. Details stopped lining up. And one incident was quietly left out of the story. By the end of this video, you'll understand why Noraly Schoenmaker didn't just slow down. She may have been stopped for a reason no one is saying out loud. To most people, Noraly looks untouchable. On camera, she is calm, confident, and completely in control. The wind rushes past her helmet as she rides through deserts, mountains, and chaotic city streets, and she seems almost like she doesn't feel fear. She smiles effortlessly at breathtaking landscapes, handles unexpected breakdowns with logic, and moves forward no matter how bad the conditions are. For years, this created an image. She is fearless, unstoppable, someone who has mastered life on the road. That image is powerful, and it is exactly why so many people believe nothing can touch her. When someone survives roadblocks, extreme weather, mechanical failures, and dangerous situations without panicking, it's easy to assume that life's problems simply bounce off them. Fans see the strength, the independence, and the confidence, and they think that means she is unbreakable. But what the camera shows is only part of the truth. What we see in videos are smiles, scenic shots, and moments of triumph. What the camera doesn't show are the long nights alone in a tiny hotel room, the exhaustion after 12 or 14 hours on a motorcycle, or the mental stress of knowing that one wrong turn could have serious consequences. Constant movement hides pain, fear, and worry. It hides the cost of independence, riding every day, carrying everything you need on two wheels, and being alone on the road is freeing, yes, but it is also exhausting. Every mile comes with tension. Every border crossed brings uncertainty. Every stop is another risk. Behind the freedom is constant responsibility. Responsibility for her safety, her equipment, her route, and herself. And the more people admired her fearlessness, the more invisible that cost became. This is why freedom has a price. Fans see the result, the smiling, confident rider on amazing roads, but few see the weight behind her choices. Independence feels glamorous on the surface, but it carries a quiet strain that builds slowly. It's emotional fatigue, physical exhaustion, and mental pressure rolled into one, and it is always there, even when no one notices. Noraly has spent years managing it, pushing forward no matter what, hiding vulnerability from the public eye. The image tells one story, but reality tells another. And understanding that reality is essential if we are going to grasp what makes the next chapters of her life truly devastating. Before she was known as Itchy Boots, Noraly's life looked, by most standards, perfect. She was educated, accomplished, and on a clear career path as a geologist. She had traveled for work to far-off places, worked in high-paying jobs, and had a stable home and a long-term relationship. On paper, she had what many people dream about: money, security, respect, and a future that seemed safe and planned. She had built something that looked impressive and solid, but beneath the surface, cracks were forming. The biggest blow came when she discovered that the person she trusted most had been unfaithful for years. It wasn't a small mistake or a moment of weakness. It was a betrayal that shook her entire life to its foundation. Not only did the relationship end, but she also lost her home in the process. Suddenly, The life she had built, the sense of stability and safety, was gone. Everything she thought she could rely on vanished overnight. For someone who had worked hard to achieve security and stability, this felt devastating. It wasn't just heartbreak, it was the destruction of an entire world she thought she could control. In that moment, Noraly faced a choice: rebuild the old life, try to reclaim what she had lost, or leave everything behind. She chose the latter. She quit her high-paying job, sold her house, and decided to leave behind everything familiar. She wasn't thinking about adventure yet. She wasn't imagining fame, YouTube subscribers, or motorcycles. She was trying to survive, trying to find a place where she could breathe, heal, and make sense of the collapse of her past. She bought a one-way ticket to India, not knowing what she would find, not knowing what the next step would be. All she knew was that staying in her old life felt impossible. It was a devastating chapter, the first real test of her resilience. She lost her security, her trust in others, and the life she thought was permanent. But out of that devastation came a decision that would define the rest of her life: to leave everything behind, to take control of her path, and to face uncertainty alone. That choice, painful as it was, would eventually lead her to motorcycles, to long roads, to adventure, and to the global audience that would later know her as Itchy Boots. But at that moment, it was nothing more than survival. And sometimes, the most important journeys begin not with bravery, but with having nowhere left to run. When Noraly bought that one-way ticket to India, it wasn't an adventure yet. It was an escape. She was broken, exhausted, and numb from everything she had lost. The betrayal, the home, the life she thought was solid. Every familiar place reminded her of what she no longer had. She didn't know what to expect in India, and for the first time in her life, she had no plan. She wasn't thinking about fame or recognition or building a YouTube channel. She just needed to get away, to disappear into a new place where she could figure out how to exist again. Landing in India, everything was overwhelming. The chaos of cities, the noise, the colors, the smells. It was unlike anything she had known before. She stayed in small guest houses, wandered the streets, and tried to make sense of her life while adjusting to a completely new culture. The loneliness was intense. For someone used to stability, the unpredictability of every day was exhausting. But in that unpredictability, something unexpected happened. She stumbled upon motorcycles, first renting a small bike just to explore the hills and villages near her temporary home. And the moment she twisted the throttle, something inside her shifted. It was electric. The vibration of the engine, the wind against her face, and the need to focus completely on the road in front of her cleared her mind in a way she hadn't experienced since the betrayal. All the pain, the worry, the grief, it faded into the hum of the machine. Suddenly, the idea of running away wasn't just about escape anymore. She was moving towards something that felt alive, something that gave her control when the rest of her life had been out of control. She named her first bike Basanti, after a feisty character in a Bollywood movie, and instantly formed a bond with it. To her, the bike wasn't just a vehicle, it was a companion, a lifeline, a partner in a world that had suddenly become hers to explore. Over the next few weeks, Noraly rode as much as she could, testing the mountains, crossing rivers, and navigating roads that seemed impossible to outsiders. Every ride strengthened her confidence. She was still learning, still figuring out what it meant to be alone in a foreign country with just a motorcycle, but she felt alive in a way she hadn't in years. The road didn't care about her past heartbreak or her lost home. It didn't judge, it didn't betray. And slowly, she began to see that maybe she could create a new life, not one built on stability or security, but on movement, freedom, and her own choices. The first videos came naturally. Noraly didn't have a production team, a script, or any real experience filming herself. She mounted a GoPro on her helmet and simply recorded what she saw, what she felt, and how she rode. The footage was raw, windy, shaky, sometimes confusing, but it carried authenticity that people immediately noticed. Viewers weren't looking for polish or professionalism. They wanted honesty, connection, and the feeling of being on the road with someone who truly knew the experience of solo travel. And Noraly gave it to them. Her early rides were small, local loops, and a few mountain passes, but the content resonated. People saw someone like them, trying to figure out life, dealing with fear, learning from mistakes, and still moving forward. She explained what she was seeing, sometimes with her background in geology, showing how landscapes formed, what rivers meant, or why the mountains looked the way they did. It wasn't just a travel vlog. It was educational, insightful, and real. She didn't have fancy editing, dramatic music, or a production crew to make everything look perfect. She had honesty, vulnerability, and motion, and that was enough to start building a loyal following. Soon, the rides grew longer, and her confidence expanded with them. She pushed further into India's mountains, crossed deserts, and eventually started planning routes that would take her beyond one country. She experimented with filming, testing angles, capturing the roads, the people, and the small moments that felt like magic on two wheels. Every ride became content. Every challenge, getting lost, running out of fuel, mechanical failures, became a story. And slowly, the channel began to grow. Subscribers trickled in at first, then surged, as viewers realized they were watching someone who was both fearless and human, someone who failed, struggled, and still kept moving. Building Itchy Boots was not easy. There were moments of fear, moments when she considered quitting, moments when the weight of everything she had left behind threatened to pull her down. She was alone, with no safety net, relying on her instincts, her knowledge, and her growing skills as a rider. But those challenges became her foundation. Each obstacle she overcame, a broken bike, a missed turn, a long ride through rain or heat, strengthened not just her skill, but her identity. She wasn't just Noraly the geologist anymore. She was Noraly, the rider, the explorer, the woman who had chosen movement over safety, freedom over security, and herself over the life she had lost. By the time her first big trip was over, thousands of kilometers across India's toughest roads, she had more than content. She had a story. She had a voice. And slowly, people began to see her not just as a traveler, but as a symbol of resilience, courage, and independence. That first period of writing, filming, and exploring set the stage for everything that came next. Fame, followers, sponsorships, none of it would have existed without those early months of uncertainty, fear, and raw determination. What started as a desperate escape from heartbreak and loss became the beginning of a life she truly chose, 1 mile at a time. As Noraly's channel grew, her life started to change in ways she hadn't anticipated. What began as a personal escape and a way to heal gradually became something much bigger. People began to recognize her on the road. Comments poured in on every video, praising her courage, her honesty, and her writing skills. Sponsorships appeared. Brands reached out. She started making money from her content. But with that growth came a shift she hadn't expected. She was no longer just a traveler. She was now a public figure. The freedom she had once loved became heavier. Suddenly, every ride was under a subtle pressure. The need to perform, to document, to deliver. Fans expected updates, new routes, and more daring adventures. With visibility came scrutiny. Mistakes, small or large, were no longer private. A mechanical breakdown, a minor accident, or even a delay could lead to speculation, worry, or criticism from thousands of people watching. Every step forward now carried a sense of responsibility that went beyond her own safety. She wasn't just riding for herself anymore. She was riding for an audience that felt invested in her every move. This was also when the hidden dangers of solo travel became more real. Roads that she could handle alone now came with the added worry that someone could take advantage of her visibility. Thieves, opportunists, or people who didn't respect boundaries became a real threat. Her independence, once freeing, now carried the weight of constant vigilance. Fame, for all its rewards, made the road less forgiving, and though she didn't show it, every mile came with the quiet anxiety of knowing that, in some ways, being recognized could put her at risk. Freedom had a price, and the higher she climbed, the more she realized how steep that price could be. The first true test of this price came in Tanzania in 2024. Noraly was riding on rough terrain, pushing herself as she always did, when everything went wrong in an instant. The road was uneven, filled with gravel and sudden dips, and fatigue had begun to slow her reactions. One misjudged turn, one unexpected patch of loose dirt, and the bike slipped. She hit the ground hard. In that split second, her world narrowed to pain and panic. The crash left her with a broken collarbone and a punctured lung. For someone whose livelihood depended entirely on being able to ride, the injury was devastating. She was alone in a foreign country, with limited medical support and no familiar face nearby. Every breath was agony. The physical pain was intense, but the mental toll was even greater. Being forced to stop, to pause a journey that had become her life, felt unbearable. It was a shock not just to her body, but to her identity. The confident, unstoppable rider she had worked to become suddenly felt vulnerable and fragile. Recovery was slow. She needed surgery and weeks of rest, followed by months of rebuilding strength. Simple tasks, once effortless, became challenging. Walking, breathing deeply, even small movements reminded her of the crash. Every time she thought about getting back on the bike, fear whispered in her mind. Could she ride like before? Would the injury leave a permanent mark, not just physically but mentally? And all the while, her fans speculated. Social media is filled with questions and rumors. Many didn't understand the depth of what she was going through. The silence after the crash was heavy, filled with private struggle and quiet determination. No camera could capture that pain. No follower could truly feel the fear that came with suddenly losing control in a life built on control. In the weeks and months that followed, Noraly faced something she had never experienced before: a forced pause. The road, which had always been her sanctuary, was off limits. She was left with time to think, to reflect, and, for the first time in years, to confront the emotional weight she had carried since leaving her old life behind. Recovery was physical, but it was also mental. She wrestled with doubt, frustration, and fear. Every plan for a new route had to be delayed. Every idea for content was put on hold. And as she healed, she realized that the road she loved was not just a place of freedom, it was also a place of risk. And the risk was real. Fans noticed her absence, and with attention came speculation. Some worried she might never ride again. Others assumed she had simply moved on to a new chapter, leaving the past behind. The reality, however, was more complex. Noraly was grappling with both the memory of the crash and the lingering anxiety it had triggered. She was learning, painfully, that even the strongest rider could be brought down by circumstances beyond her control. Her resilience was tested not in action, but in patience. She had to find the courage to face the road again, to overcome fear, and to rebuild her confidence, one small step at a time. During this silence, she also realized how much of her life had been shaped by danger and adrenaline. Without the road, without movement, she felt untethered. The crash was devastating, but it also became a turning point. It reminded her that freedom came with consequences, that independence carried responsibility, and that every choice had weight. This period of quiet struggle set the stage for the next chapter, one where her skills, preparation, and courage would be tested again, in ways that would challenge her physically, mentally, and emotionally. In November 2024, Noraly arrived in Erbil, Iraq, confident that she was safe. She had parked her 1987 Yamaha Tenere, which she had affectionately named Frankie, in what she thought was a secure hotel parking lot. The city was unfamiliar, but she had grown skilled at reading situations and taking precautions. She had ridden thousands of kilometers, faced countless unknowns, and always found a way to protect herself and her machines. Or so she thought. One morning, she woke to a reality that every motorcyclist dreads. Frankie was gone. The wires had been cut, the ignition bypassed, and the bike, her home, her transport, her companion, had vanished. The shock was immediate. This wasn't just a loss of property. This was her lifeline stripped away in an instant. Panic surged, but Noraly's years of experience on the road kicked in. She hadn't just relied on luck, she had prepared for situations like this. Hidden inside the bike's frame were a GPS tracker and an AirTag, devices that could pinpoint its location. Working with the local police, Noraly tracked Frankie's movements in real time. Every minute felt unbearable. Questions swirled in her mind. Had the thieves already stripped the bike for parts? Was it crossing borders on a truck? The tension was intense, but slowly, step by step, the signal led them to a nearby location. Frankie had been abandoned, likely spooked or sensing the heat. Miraculously, the bike was recovered, and even a suspect was caught. Relief washed over her, but it was tinged with anger and frustration. The road she had once loved now felt fragile, vulnerable, and unpredictable. This wasn't just about a bike. It was a reminder that fame and visibility made her a target, and that even preparation couldn't eliminate every risk. Just months later, in June 2025, Noraly faced another shocking reminder of the road's dangers. While on a book tour in Swansea, Wales, she was entrusted with a loaner bike from Yamaha Europe, a brand new Tenere 700. She had assumed it would be safe, parked securely, and that this city, familiar, calm, and Western, would be less threatening than other places she had been. But once again, reality hit hard. Overnight, the bike was stolen. The experience was different this time. The recovery process worked again, thanks to tracking devices. The police managed to locate and return the bike, but it had been damaged. The ignition was smashed, plastics scratched, and the sense of security she had tried to hold onto was shattered. A creeping feeling began to settle in. The road she loved, the independence she had fought so hard to earn, now carried a constant awareness that safety could be fleeting. Every parking spot, every stop, every unfamiliar city became a calculation. The mental weight of vigilance was exhausting, and yet she couldn't and wouldn't stop. These two incidents revealed a side of solo travel that fans rarely saw. The freedom she had embraced came with a price: anxiety, vigilance, and the reality that every mile traveled could bring a new form of loss or danger. Physical injuries like the Tanzania crash tested her body, but the thefts tested her mind. Her independence, fame, and courage made her a target, and the lessons were brutal. Yet through it all, Noraly continued to ride. She refused to let fear dictate her choices. She learned that freedom is never free. It comes with costs that are often invisible to those watching from afar. And with each recovery, each regained bike, each moment of vigilance, she became stronger, smarter, and more aware of the true challenges of her lifestyle. Another blow came not from roads or thieves, but from the realities of the world beyond the handlebars. In 2025, Noraly planned a book tour in the United States to promote her first memoir, a milestone that many would have seen as a reward for her years of work. But geopolitical realities intervened. Immigration challenges, travel restrictions, and security concerns forced her to cancel parts of the tour. For someone who had built her life on freedom, flexibility, and movement, this was a professional and personal disappointment. It was a quiet devastation. No dramatic headlines, no viral stories. Fans were left with speculation, and Noraly had to manage her own frustration and sadness privately. She had put effort into planning routes, meetings, and appearances, hoping to connect directly with her audience in a way that went beyond screens and videos. And yet, despite her careful planning, the world had imposed limits she could not control. This was a reminder that even someone who had mastered control over her life on the road was still subject to forces outside her influence. It was a humbling experience, one that emphasized the fact that freedom, no matter how fiercely pursued, has boundaries. Through all of this, Noraly had to learn patience again. She had to accept that disappointment, setbacks, and obstacles were part of life, even for someone who had proven resilient in ways few could imagine. She couldn't ride through this problem. She had to live with it, reflect on it, and find a way forward. The book tour's cancellation became another chapter in the ongoing story of challenges, showing that devastation is often cumulative, not singular, and that strength is measured not only in surviving accidents or thefts, but also in navigating the quiet losses. So what is the devastating news everyone has been asking about? It's not a single moment, a single crash, or even a single theft. It's the accumulation of experiences, the steady pressure, and the repeated confrontations with vulnerability that add up over time. It's the combination of physical injuries like the Tanzania crash, mental strain from constant vigilance, emotional isolation from solo travel, and professional setbacks such as the canceled book tour. Each event alone could be survived. Together, they create a deep, ongoing weight. This is the real devastation, the truth behind the image of Noraly Schoenmaker as invincible, untouchable, and carefree. Fans see the freedom, the beautiful landscapes, the thrill of adventure, and the confidence she radiates. What they don't see is the cost, the nights of anxiety, the hours of physical therapy, the fear of being alone in dangerous situations, and the mental load of constantly protecting her identity, her equipment, and herself. It is an erosion of certainty, a slow accumulation of challenges that tests every part of her being. Yet even in this devastation, there is resilience. Noraly continues to ride, to explore, and to share her experiences. She has learned to live with the risks, to prepare for the worst, and to keep moving forward despite everything that could stop her. This is why her story resonates. It isn't just about motorcycles, travel, or adventure. It's about the cost of freedom, the price of independence, and the courage it takes to keep going when life doesn't play fair. The devastation isn't dramatic in a single headline. It is quiet, real, and relentless. And it is what makes her journey so profoundly human. Noraly Schoenmaker's story shows us that freedom has a price. Behind every adventure, every mile, there's risk, pain, and quiet struggle. She's faced heartbreak, crashes, thefts, and setbacks. Yet she keeps riding, proving that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the choice to keep going anyway. Her journey reminds us that strength is built in the quiet, unseen moments, and independence comes with responsibility. If her story inspired you, drop a comment below with your thoughts. Like this video to support her journey, and subscribe for more stories of resilience and courage.